Okay, so today I'm going to be doing my monthly wrap, talking all the books that I read in the month of November. I am a little bit late this time round, but given that I am only a little bit late this time round for the first time in over 23 months, I think it's okay. But anyway, we are here. So let's talk about all the books that I read in the month of November, starting as per usual with my favourite thing, putting the stats on the screen in 3, 2, 1, go. So, for the month of November, I read 11 books comprising of 3 fantasy, 2 cozy mysteries, 2 LGBTIQ+ books, 1 thriller, 1 classic, 1 dystopian, and 1 contemporary. For my age groups, I read 6 YA, 3 adult, and 2 middle grade. To my lengths, I read 2 tomes, 1 3/4 tome, 4 half tomes, and 4 novellas, totaling 3,742 pages. For my star ratings, I had 2 5 stars, 5 4 stars, 3 3 stars, and 1 2 star. So a mixed bag there. Alright, now we're going to move into the next portion of this video where I talk about all the books that I DNF'd in the month of November. I DNF'd 2 books in the month of November. The Foxhole Court by Nora Sakavic and The Little French Bridal Shop by Jennifer Dupuis. This book was DNF'd through no fault of Nora Sakovic's own. It's just that there are some key nugget moments that happen throughout the book that I was rather distracted when I read it. I missed them, and I really felt like I was just getting more and more out of the loop. Totally my fault. I DNF'd the book. Maybe I'll go back to it if I have more time next year. The Little French Bridal Shop by Jennifer Dupuis, completely opposite reason. I DNF'd this book. I am not going back to it. I'm definitely unhauling it in January when I unhaul all of my books. This book promised to be something. It turned out to be something else. I recommend watching, if you haven't seen it already, my looking back on the most eagerly anticipated new releases for 2021 video that I did very, very recently. I speak in great detail about my thoughts on this book and why I DNF'd it over there. But yeah, so DNF this one and this one. 2 books in the month of November. Now we're going to get on to the books that I did read in the month of November. However, I want to give a shout out to my November mid-month wrap that I did basically halfway through the month of November. In that video, I spoke about all the books that I had read so far in the month of November. So if you haven't seen that video, I'm going to leave it either up there as a card or in the description below. So yeah, go ahead and check that out. For now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hold up those books that I spoke about there and let you know my star ratings, and then I'm going to move on to the other books that you haven't seen me talk about. City of Heavenly Fire by Cassandra Clare is the final book in the Shadowhunter series. I gave this book 4 stars. New Moon by Stephanie Meyer is the second book in the Twilight series. I gave this book 4 stars. Kate in Waiting by Becky Albertalli. I gave this book 5 stars. 12 Slaves of Christmas by Jacqueline Frost. How beautiful is it? I finally have the physical copy. 4 stars, although it should be 4.5. Two Can Keep a Secret by Karen M. McManus. 4 stars. And the second book after 12 Slaves of Christmas, which was this book, 'Twas the Knife Before Christmas. 4 stars. All of those books I go into greater detail on in my November mid-month wrap, so if you haven't seen it yet, feel free to check those out. Now, let's talk about the rest of the books that I read for the month of November. And the next book that I did read was my classic of the month, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. You guys, this book let me down. This book is an adult classic, yeah, and I gave this book 2 stars. Let me tell you why it let me down. So, this book opens up with letters that are being written by a doctor whose name is Frankenstein. We learn a little about his backstory as we traverse through, I think, 4 letters, and I really enjoyed them. Once the letters portion is over and we get to the standard narration, we are following an in-depth interview that is being done with a monster that the doctor created that is also called Frankenstein. For the sake of simplicity, let's just refer to them as the doctor and the monster. So we're interviewing this monster and we're finding out more, well, we're reading about an interview with the monster to find out more about its backstory and what it's been going through, and that's when my issues started to come in. When we first meet the monster of Frankenstein, he seems to be in a very neutral mood. The more we go along, the more his mood seems to darken. It goes from neutral to sad, to depressed, to angry, and it just really wasn't what I needed at that point. Looking back now, I don't necessarily think this is a bad book at all. It's a classic for a reason, and I get that. But it just wasn't working for me. I wanted something that wasn't so moody. I didn't necessarily need something that was happy, happy, joy, joy, but this was just way too moody for me, and so I gave it 2 stars, but I do recommend it. Obviously, it's a classic for a reason. So I'm not saying I personally recommend it because I didn't enjoy it, but I'm saying take what I'm saying with a grain of salt about this one, because it's clearly a classic for a reason. Those that I read it with on the Discord, that I buddy read this with, loved this book. So, you know, it just wasn't for me. The next book that I read was this book, 4, by Veronica Roth. This is a YA dystopian and is and will be the one and only dystopian that Mr. Francy read in 2020. Why? Why am I only reading one? Dystopians as a genre for books was something that I was introduced to for the first time last year in 2020. I didn't know that it was a genre that existed, and then I fell in love and read so many different dystopian books last year. This is the only one I've read this year, and will be the only one I've read this year. That needs to change in 2022. But anyway, this is a companion book to the Divergent series. In the Divergent series, it is a trilogy. We have 2 characters that are main characters. We follow one of them. We follow a girl by the name of Tris Pryor. Tris has a love interest in this book whose name is Tobias, or otherwise he is nicknamed Four. In this book, we follow Four's backstory. I loved this series so much, and last year I gave it an award for my favorite world-building book. Divergent. So I love the series a lot. I love Tobias I just loved him so much. This book is his backstory. I went into this book thinking that it was going to be the exact same book as this one, but told from Four's perspective. No. There are highlights from this book towards the end of this book, but the majority of this book is all about Four. Growing up in the faction he was born in, and then going to the ceremony to choose what faction he wants to go to, and many other different things along the way. I really thought this was fantastic. I gave it 5 stars because it absolutely deserved it. If you have read the Divergent series and you liked it, or if you liked Four or Tobias, I highly recommend this. This was an absolute treat. Thank you, Veronica Roth. I really appreciate the fact that you wrote this book, because it's going to have a special place in my heart for a very long time. The next book that I read was this book, Down Amongst the Sticks and Bones by Cianan McGuire. This is book number 2 in the Wayward Children series. It is a YA fantasy, and I gave this book 3.5 stars. Okay, I'm not going to go into too much detail about my thoughts to do with this book until I get to the end of December, and I'll explain why. So I've been wanting to read the Wayward Children series for the longest time. As I say, I've nearly been on BookTube for 2 years. I've probably been wanting to read it for 2 years. So I'm really happy that I did. However, the booktuber that recommended this series to me, which by the way is Murphy from booktuber channel Murphy Napier, she actually recommended that everyone read book number 2 before reading book number 1, because book number 1 contains spoilers for the entire book of book number 2. So I went in knowing this and decided to follow her advice. I read book 2 first, and then this month in December, I'm actually going to read book 1. I want to hold off my thoughts on book 2 until I've read book 1, because I had a few niggly, nitpicky issues here and there with this book, but I think that that is because I went in to the series starting with book 2. So that's why I want to hold off. I want to read book 1 to give me some perspective on my thoughts of book 2, and then I will explain my thoughts after I've read both 1 and 2. But at the moment, it receives an average rating from me, 3.5 stars. The basic premise of this book is that we are following we're following twin girls, Jacqueline and Gillian, known as Jack and Jill. They end up finding a hidden doorway into a mysterious land where things are not what they seem. And the question is, can they make it out, and can they make it out alive? This was great. It was good. There were some issues that I had, and as I said, I want to read book 1 before I give my full thoughts on it. But I do recommend it. 3.5 stars. The next book that I read was this book, Water Wings by Morris Gleitzman. How cute is that guinea pig on that cover with the little water wings? This is a middle grade contemporary, and I gave this book also 3.5 stars, and let me explain why. First, I'll give you the premise. In this book, we're following a girl by the name of Pearl, whose best friend is her guinea pig named Winston. Unfortunately, one day Winston dies, and this is very tough for Pearl. She decides to, in her own way, what is the word, like freeze him? You know how, I don't know the word, but you know how people can get frozen when they die, so if there's a cure or whatever, they can be brought back. She decides to do this with Winston, but in her own way, because she's a child, she decides to bury Winston in the freezer so that he can be frozen and brought back at some point, and she has little chats with him along the way. Pearl has also always wanted a grandmother, but her father's gone. Her mother, as in he left her mother. Her mother doesn't have living parents at the moment. Her mother ends up dating a new guy. He has a mother, and Pearl gets really excited to meet her grandmother for the first time. Pearl's mother and the new guy end up having to travel interstate for work, so Grandma decides to come down and babysit Pearl. And, well, Grandma is not the grandma that Pearl thought she would be. She's not the rocking chair, knitting, sweet old lady that Pearl thought she would be. That, in combination with the freezing and talking with Winston, sets everyone up for a really good story. Unfortunately for me, I gave this book 3.5 stars, and the reason is definitely a mood reading rating based on my mood. I read this book when I was in primary school, or if you're American, elementary school, and I loved it then. I had not read it in years. I went to my mother's house, I think it was about a year ago or so, and saw this book, so I decided to grab it and take it home with me because it's my book, and I wanted to reread it. And it's different reading it as an adult because it wasn't as action-packed as I wanted it to be. Is there anything inherently wrong with the book? Being a middle grade? No, there isn't. If I was to base my star rating on it being a middle grade and giving a neutral, objective rating, I would give it 4.5 or 5 stars. But based on my mood, I gave it 3.5 because I wish it was more action-packed. I do recommend it though. It's an easy read to get through, and it's different. Imagining the most perfect grandma who comes over and she's completely different than you would imagine. So anyway, I thought it was good. 3.5 stars from me. The final book that I read in the month of November was this book, Me, My Dad and the End of the Rainbow by Benjamin Dean. This is a middle grade LGBTIQ+ book. I gave this book 3 stars. So this book recently has been floating all the way around booktube. If I've joined a sprint, or I've watched a TBR, or a monthly rap video, I'm seeing this book popping up everywhere. And the premise to me sounded like something that was so important that I couldn't miss this opportunity. So I got this book express delivered to me because I was really excited to see what Benjamin Dean would do. The premise of this book is that we have the premise I was told is that we have a child whose mother and father end up splitting up, and his father tells him that he is gay. And the son, who we're following, is a bit confused, doesn't really know what's going on, but being a child, he doesn't really want to speak out of turn. He doesn't know what to say. And so this is a book about dealing with a father telling a child he's gay and how the child navigates this. So I thought this would be a great read, a really important read. I hadn't read anything like this in middle grade before, and LGBTIQ plus social issues mean the world to me. To see this being tackled in a middle grade book from the perspective of a child meant so much to me. And I was so thankful that Benjamin Dean wrote this book. However, and it's a very big however, I loved this book until the halfway mark, and then something happens at the halfway mark that really upset me. So, in the first half of the book, what's his name? Archie? Yeah, Archie's dad tells Archie that he's gay, and Archie's trying to work through his feelings and sort out, you know, how he feels about it and what he thinks and all this kind of stuff. And he's talking to his friends about it, his friends that he trusts. And I really loved that. That's what I wanted from this book. Then we get to the halfway mark. I'm not going to spoil it because it is the halfway mark. So I'll just say Archie ends up going somewhere. And when he gets there, all these things go down that detract from what I wanted, which was to see Archie more and more trying to navigate what his father has told him. So we kind of get distracted with, funny enough, an action-packed moment that goes on for many chapters, which you think I would love, but it detracted from what I wanted to deal with. This action-packed stuff that goes on finally concludes in the second last or the last chapter. Well, at the end of the, at the beginning of the second last or the beginning of the last chapter. And then we have about a chapter to deal with everything. And then the book is practically over. There's about 5 more pages after that, but then the book is practically over. So that really frustrated me because I wanted the whole book to be about Archie dealing with this rather than the first half being Archie dealing with it and the second half being Archie decides to go somewhere and things happen because he's decided to go where he's going. I did not like that at all. So I gave this book 3.5 stars. I appreciate what Benjamin Dean was doing. I just really wish he could have abstained from taking Archie where he did in the second half and kept going from where the first half was, because it really detracted from what I wanted to see in this book. And now for everyone's favourite game that we like to call these are most of the books that I read for the month of November 2021. What books did you read in the month of November? Let me know in the comments section below. But in the meantime, that is where I am going to leave it, letting you guys go with peace, blessings, and so much love. I post videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 10 PM Australian Eastern Standard Time, and I'll see you again soon. Mwah! Thank you so much for watching, and of course, happy reading!